Hi everyone, I'm Chris and welcome back to another episode in my traction engine build series. In this episode we're looking at the belly tank. So here I am, I'm just sort of unpacking the parts, and just like all the other stuff we need to clean the mill scale off so it's all a bit shiny now and it's clean, ready for paint later on. Takes a bit of time, but you use a combination of the angle grinder and the patio cleaner, the sort of hydrochloric acid that we've used on the wheel spokes before, and it comes off in the end. So I'm just temporarily bolting a couple of the brackets together just to get an idea of how long the bolts are and whether we need to shorten them. For these ones it turns out we do, which we'll see later on in the video, but also we've got to clean the lettering and numbering off the heads of the bolts, which I normally do in the lathe, so I'll show you that now. So first of all we've got to install the 3-jaw chuck, so we clean the spindle nose up a bit just to make sure there's no swarf or anything in there. So the first bolt goes in, and all I'm doing is taking a single pass over the head of the bolt just to give it a skim and remove the letters and numbers. What I did do is accidentally waste a load of time cleaning up bolts that end up being on the inside of the tank, but I just did the whole lot without thinking about it, so it's not too bad. So now we're starting to get some of the panels together. You can see how the sort of internal bracing brackets go on and how all the external visible panels are joined together internally, because eventually the steering mechanism is held on the bottom of this tank, so it has to do more than just hold water. It's a structural part of the steering as well. I found with some of these parts that they tended to go rusty a lot quicker than other parts, so they must be made out of a slightly different alloy of steel. As in those triangular plates you can see in there have been sandblasted, which is why the finish is slightly different, but that's because they seem to develop surface rust in no time at all, where the other plates you see there have just been cleaned up and haven't seen any rust at all. So then we had the arduous task of installing all the rivets. I can't remember exactly how many there are, but it did seem to go on for a long time. The technique I was using was to start in the centre of a panel, so you can see there the rivets in the centre are already done, and work towards the outer edges. And so we'd begin by installing an Allen head machine screw with a nut in every other hole, just to sort of pull it tight because they're stronger than the rivets. So once we've got those in every other hole, we then fill in the spaces between with a rivet, and then you go along and you take out all the Allen heads and replace those as well. I found that generally the fitting was pretty good in that all the holes, for the most part, lined up. There were just a few that had to be cleared out, and there was the occasional one that wasn't drilled, but I believe that was intentional because it sort of allows for variances, so you can fit it all together, then drill the last hole yourself, which you'll see later on. So here we are, as I said, every other hole's been filled in with a rivet bolt, so now we're going along taking out all the machine screws and changing those for rivet bolts as well. So here we are drilling one of the holes that was missed. I just use the air drill for this because I find it doesn't sort of snatch and grab as much as the normal cordless. So just continuing to work along another edge now where I'm using the same method as before, just filling in every other hole with a machine screw first and then putting rivets in between and then swapping them out.
I've got a little issue to solve here in that the brackets for the steering are not exactly square to the tender. You can see there's a gap there, which if we compare to the other side, is a tiny gap but much better, so we won't worry about that side. So what I'm going to do is set it up in the mill, because this is such a stiff material and be impossible to bend, or at least with what I've got. We'll set it up in the mill, machine the base at a slight angle to pull it in.
Now I'm using the mill simply because I've got one, but there's no reason you couldn't do this with a file. It would just take a bit longer. I haven't done any sort of precision measurements on any of the angles. I've just put in you can see it there, a bit of copper wire just to cause the bracket to tilt over ever so slightly.
Okay, so we've got the bracket back on now. Don't know if you can see, but it looks good there.
Okay, so this is what I was mentioning earlier, where these bolts are obviously a bit too long. So what I ended up doing is I put some bar stock in the lathe and cut off a small chunk and drilled and tapped it, and that enabled me to hold the bolt in the lathe. And then I could part off the bolt itself to get them all to the same length. So here we are, just parting off the part that I've made, and then we stick a bolt in, and you can see here how much we're going to cut off. So here we are in the lathe, and of course I have to run the lathe in reverse for this, otherwise the customer will just unscrew the bolt. So there's one done, just a few more to go.
Okay, so before we can put the ends on, we need to grind these pieces to a taper. So if you have a look at this, you'll see that we need to grind them down to close up that gap there.
then after that, once again, it's the same old task of putting in another X number of rivets.
So I've finally got to the end of putting all those rivets in. So what I've done now is I've just put in these bolts here from the back. So we put them in from the back, Loctite them in, and that means that we can put the cover on and they work as studs. And then nuts go on there. And then the nuts go on the outside, so if the water gets into the fixing and starts rusting it, hopefully the nuts won't rust on.
So the final task on this tank is that we've got to seal it so that it's all waterproof. So here you can see I've taped up all the joints ready for the tank sealer to go in. Other than that though, this tank is now complete, so that's the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you're not already subscribed, click the subscribe button and you'll be notified next time I put a video out. Sorry it's been so long since the last one. Hopefully the next one won't be so long. See ya, bye.